Baba was being very whimsical that day when he... I'm going to tell you the darker side. Yes, that's true. I think I'm just not going to speak so much about Baba theory, but I'm going to tell you about my coming to Baba and certain things that happened in my life during that time. I won't give you the whole build-up about the scaffolding, as Billy so wonderfully explained this morning. There was a lot of scaffolding that led me to come one day to the Metropolitan Opera House to enroll in the ballet school there, little knowing that the principal teacher was Margaret Krask. I came to that school and I was there about a year, as far as I can remember now. That was 1951. And in my second year, I got into her class. She taught the intermediate and advanced classes, so naturally I didn't make it right away. It took me a year to get there. Anyway, I got into her class, and immediately, as did so many other people, fell under her spell. I never really knew what it was, but this woman was something quite remarkable in her honesty and in her dedication and devotion and in her sense of humor. Now, I have to say, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be related to her, but you have to understand that she is in no way, in my mind or in anyone else that knows her, put on any kind of an altar. She was my link with Baba, and in a strange, wonderful way, she was my trainer in Baba, because while I was trying to find out and follow Baba, I was also trying to become a dancer, and dancing is a very strong discipline. It's a yoga of sorts. In any case, in 1952, I was in her class when she suddenly had to go away, and we had heard that this man, this strange man that she had been with in India for 7 years, had had an accident. And that I remember very clearly, her leaving. But, you know, in those days, things were very different. We didn't know about yogis, we didn't know about spirituality, we didn't know anything connected with anything spiritual was kind of looked on as sort of loony and far out, you know, the kind of Ouija board type old lady sitting around a room talking about spirituality, in other words, raising the spirits of the dead. We really knew nothing about it, and we knew very little about her. As a matter of fact, there's a very funny story. You know that in ballet, the girls wear a kind of a dress, a very short dress made out of a gauze-like material called tarlatan, and it's called a tutu. And when she was working with the American Ballet Theater, one of these tutus disappeared, and the story went around that she had eaten it, because they all knew that yogis, you know, swallowed yards and yards of this gauze to cleanse themselves. And it sounds funny, but you see, that's really kind of about where it was at. To skip a bit, 1954, I got a job in Virginia, and at that place was a girl named Marie and a boy named Peter. Now, Marie had found out about Baba through Tex Hightower just the previous year. Peter was somebody I had never met before, but he arrived on the scene, and immediately we were rivals for whatever dance parts there were, and in every way. And while he was there, he found out about Baba, and the very fact that he was talking to Marie put me into a frenzy of something or other, and made me just reject the whole thing as something very, very off the wall and ridiculous. We spent the summer and came back to New York, and Peter came to the Met to study with Miss Krask. And one evening we were going out after class. We used to go out and have something to drink, with soda or coffee or something. And we had been fighting all this time, fighting friends. And we got into a discussion, and I remember very clearly, he got really, really intense and really bad, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, you're so bad that nothing could help you but Meher Baba." And I said, who is that? You see, I hadn't even known the name. And then he told me, well, he'd heard about it practically the week before, so he didn't know a heck of a lot, but he told me about reincarnation and karma as far as he understood it at that point, and that immediately seemed so right to me that I decided that I had to find out about it also. So it took me about 2 weeks, and I got up enough nerve to go to Miss Krask and ask her if I could speak to her about Meher Baba. And I remember also saying to her, I know I'm not good enough for this. And she said, don't be ridiculous, even criminals can follow Baba. You know, so that was the beginning. I made an appointment to go and see her in her room. She doesn't have an apartment, she lives in a room in a hotel and has always lived in that same hotel as long as I've ever known her. The story went around that the room had all kinds of blue lights and gongs went off when you came in and there was incense burning and all of that. And I was knocked on the door with great trepidation, but unfortunately or fortunately, none of that was true. It was an ordinary hotel room, and there was Miss Krask. And what happened was, Miss Krask told us stories about Baba and her times with Baba. She gave me at first the Perfect Master to read, and then later on discourses. But we really never really talked about Baba in that sense very much. If I had a question, maybe I asked her, but basically she tried to bring Baba to life, and of course succeeded very brilliantly, I think, for us. And she gave us pictures. Now, all of these people, myself, Marie, Peter, we lived in the same apartment house, a little crummy tenement on 49th Street, and around the back of it lived Tex. And we would gather after one of us had gone to see Miss Krask. We'd all get together and share in this, whatever stories had passed around and whatever pictures had passed around. So we had a very kind of little intensive ashram going there on 49th Street. Now, what happened was that because I was following Baba and because I was studying ballet with Miss Krask, things started to really cook. I had a very fiery temperament. I was always becoming frustrated, either with myself or with what was going on, and stopping in the middle of the room and stamping my feet and bumping into people and cursing and doing all this stuff. Well, I mean, you can't have that kind of behavior in a ballet class normally, but of course you can't have that kind of behavior with Baba. And this was a continuing battle with Miss Krask and I. I was always being made to sit down on the steps in the front of the class and watch the class, or some kind of little disciplinary actions. But one morning, and I had worked myself up to the point where I got into the professional class, which took place every morning, I think, about 10 o'clock. And in that class was this friend of mine, Tex Hightower. Some of you may have met him. He was, to me, like I've idolized him. He was in the Metropolitan Opera Ballet Company, so he was a real live professional dancer. He had met Baba in 1952, the whole thing, and he's like an encyclopedia. If any of you have ever spoken to him, he knows everything about everything. And I thought he was the living end. Well, this is what happened. We were doing our first exercises, bar work, where you stand and you hold on to the bar with one hand and you exercise one foot, and then you turn around on the other side and repeat the same exercise with the other foot on the other side. And Miss Krask said an exercise, and we started. Now, Tex was standing behind me. The first thing that I noticed was that the entire class was doing a different exercise than I was doing. And I got very angry because I thought I was the only one that had seen it correctly. And they were all doing it wrong, and she wasn't saying anything to them. And I got really, really angry, and I got sort of purple, but I sort of forced myself to do the exercise. I turned around on the other side, and then Tex was in front of me. And she said, Anne, and they started, and there was Tex doing this exercise, not according to me, but according to the rest of the class. She was doing what they were doing, and that was the end. I just, for some strange reason, became paralyzed, and I couldn't move. And Miss Krask clapped her hands and stopped the class, and she said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "Miss Krask, they're all doing the wrong exercise." And she said, "Never mind, just go on with it." And so she said, and the pianist played again, and I couldn't. I just couldn't. I was totally frozen and really angry. My eyes were flashing. So that the nerve, that Tex, my best friend, my idol, would dare to agree with the rest of the class. So she clapped her hands again and she said, "Either go on or leave." So there was my choice. And naturally, being me, I chose to leave. And so I stormed out of this place in a great huff, and I got dressed, and I went downstairs to the little restaurant, had a cup of coffee, waited till the class was over, And then my plan was to go back upstairs, get all my clothes, and leave that school, and leave Baba, and leave Miss Kraskin, everything. That was the end. I was so angry. So I went back upstairs to get my things, and the secretary of the school, who idolized Miss Krass, said, "Now, you cannot come back to class until you apologize to her." And I said, "I'll never apologize to her. That's the end. Goodbye." And I took my stuff and stormed out and left. And I sat home for about 4 days. I couldn't get myself to go to a class anywhere else. And nothing happened. I just was frozen in my apartment. And one day, I found myself walking down the street in front of her hotel. And then I found myself in the lobby, and I found myself on the house phone calling up to her, and I said, "Hello," and there was this stony voice saying, "Hello." And I said, "It's Donald." Silence. And I said, "I think I'd better come up and talk to you." And she said, "I think you better had." Slam. And so I went upstairs and knocked on the door, my knees shaking. And the door opened, and there was this woman with her hair down. She has very, very long hair, and she always has it tied up in a little knot. And there it was down. No makeup, house coat. She looked like a horrible witch. And I went, "Ah!" And she said, "Come in, sit down." And she said, started out, "Why did you do that?" And I started to say, "Well, blah, blah." And she said, "Never mind." She said, "You know, you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done that." And I said, "But I do." And she said, "And what's more, you don't love Baba." And the minute she said that, I started to cry, collapsed, and that was the end of it. That was the total end of it. It was like you talk about surrender. You see, I never could surrender to Baba, just like say, "I surrender, Baba." Billy had a blowtorch, and I had a sledgehammer that had to hit me over the head. Well, I think that was a kind of a breaking point, but it wasn't the end of all my troubles with her. But that was a major thing. Then, that was around 1955. In 1956, Baba came to the West, as you all know. And I had gotten a job in Canada, which started about 2 weeks before Baba was due to arrive. And that then became the first of my experiences of the difficulties that one encounters sometimes in trying to go to see Baba. They didn't want me to go. I had just gotten there, and I said, "I have to go back to New York." And they wanted to know why. And when they told, interestingly enough, the company was run by an English woman from London who knew all about Baba because, you know, of the scandals that Miss Kraska herself had created in the 1930s. They're running off to India. I mean, when I say she knew about Baba, she thought it was a scandal. So, nevertheless, I got to go. And I went down to New York, and the first time I saw Baba was at the airport when he arrived. A group of us and many of Baba lovers were there. And again, something very important in my relationship with Baba happened. When Baba was finished with the customs, he came out into a kind of a big room, and in that room all of us were standing. And Baba went around the room greeting individual people, stroking them on the cheek or taking their hand or whatever. And I said, "Oh, I can't, you know, when he comes to me, he's going to really, you know, embrace me, and I'm going to be really special." What happened was he went up to Peter and took him by the chin and looked into his eyes with such longing and love. And I thought, "Oh, wait till he gets to me." Walked right past me. And that was the first of a kind of a thing where I had trouble with Baba because I wanted him to do what I wanted him to do. And that came in between us to a great extent. We then, after that little blow was over, we went back into the city, and at a certain time we were told to come to the Delmonico, and that's when I first had my first real meeting with Baba, which was very beautiful. It was very simple. I didn't have any great experience at the time, and again I was very upset because I wanted one. And some people collapsed in tears, and some people banged their heads on the wall, and some people looked like, you know, the world had come to an end. And I felt that I loved Baba, and I felt that he loved me. I felt that recognition that people have said they feel, but no great whammy, no waves of love, not the experience that I wanted to have. Now you have to remember this because I'm going to come back to it in the end. Nevertheless, we had a wonderful time there. We had no idea what the procedure was. We met Baba, and then we went outside into the antechamber and waited. And luckily, because we were there, Baba called everybody who was there in again, and then we got the clue that you hang around and you don't go away, you stay. And you that way get to see Baba many more times than you thought you could. In any case, I left Baba and he went, I think I told the story about the bus. That happened that time, last night. I left Baba and I left the 4 dancers who went with him on the trip, and I went back to Canada to lead my life, which was very hectic and stormy. In the meantime, unbeknownst to me, when they were out in the West Coast, I believe in San Francisco, Baba suddenly asked the dancers to dance for him. And they had to come up with something in a small hotel room. They had no preparation, no shoes, no costumes, no music, nothing rehearsed, nothing. But he asked for it, and so they did it. And they all felt very inadequate, that they had not done a good job, and they said that if Baba ever came again, they would prepare something. This is what they said to themselves. Okay. In 1958, I was on a 3-month tour of the United States on a bus, traveling one-night stands. As a matter of fact, I came out at that time here to California. And that was when Baba announced he was coming again. And I decided that I wasn't going to go and see him, because I got confused with doing one's duty towards one's work. And I wrote him to this Marie, as a matter of fact, and said, I'm not coming to see Baba because I think Baba would want me to stay here and do my job. And so the next thing I knew is I had a telegram, call Miss Krask immediately. And I called her. And this was really the first time she ever had interfered in my life. She said, what is this I hear about you not coming to see Baba? And I said, well, Miss Krask, and she said, never mind. Just give me a chance. The only thing that matters is to see Baba. And I said, well, fine, okay, I'm coming. But how do it was 1 week before he was supposed to be here. You know what goes on for this kind of thing. You can imagine what went on then with reservations and arrangements and whatnot and all of that stuff. And then, of course, you had to make your own arrangements to get there. So I said, well, what if they say I can't go? And Miss Kress said, just go and think of Baba and leave it up to him and see what happens. So it was very interesting because I had this thing about duty, and I did not want to go if I was going to break my sense of duty to the company. And what happened was the directress of the company spent about an hour and a half telling me how horrible I was. And every time I would say, yes, but can I go? And you see, going, curiously enough, was arranged over a period of time when there was a break in the activities of the company. I only had to miss 2 performances in all that whole time. There was a layover of several days, and then the company traveled by train to Mexico City, and there was a whole wonderful empty period, but she still wouldn't let me go. I remember her saying, can't you find some other time to get your spiritual refreshment? I said, well, this has nothing to do with that. And so what happened was she destroyed any sense of loyalty I had to her. So when the meeting came to an end, she wouldn't give me an answer. She said, you'll have to wait. The first thing I did was to go downstairs to the travel agent and book a ticket. And, so she eventually came around. She had to, because she couldn't really lose me. I would have been, at that point, there was no time to rehearse other substitutes. And she let me go, and I went. Now, because I had told everybody I wasn't going, they didn't tell me that they were working up a program for Baba. See, some people have asked me about when I danced for Baba. And I suppose most of you know that the dancers gave a performance for Baba. They had rehearsed a whole program. They had special numbers choreographed for this program. They made costumes. They had the music recorded. They had a certain amount of lights. It was really, as far as they could do in a situation like that, it was a really professional job. And mostly all of the dancers were professionals. So I arrived to find out that all my trusting friends had behind my back arranged this performance and not told me about it, and I wasn't included. And that really raised the hackles, because, you see, I always felt somehow or other that, I don't know, didn't know what I was doing there. That why was I following Baba at all? I mean, I did love Baba, as far as I knew, but it was like being in a party that you weren't invited to, that you wandered into by accident. And being around Baba was extremely difficult for me because I wanted Baba to shower some kind of personal, even one moment where he would recognize that I was me, you know, as opposed to anybody else. I didn't have to be the topmost one, but I just wanted this personal thing, and it just never seemed to happen. And I was always watching him, and he was always looking at other people, or always touching other people, and I was always embroiled in this terrible thing, which, by the way, I found out many years later, hit almost everybody else. But I thought it was my own thing. Anyway, being like that and feeling like that, there I was, excluded from this performance. So I said, well, I'm going to dance too. And they said, well, they couldn't say no, you know, they didn't want to say no. So I said, I went to Miss Kraskin and I said, I'm going to dance, and she gave me a very icy look, but she didn't say no. Then I thought, well, what will I do? Again, I had no preparation, no ballet shoes, no costume, no music to dance to, nothing that I even knew in all the things I had danced in that you could take out and do as a separate dance. And I really struggled against it. I kept fighting all the time, and I would go up to her and Miss Kraskin and say, well, I'm going to dance. And she would look at me icily, but she wouldn't say no. And finally, I had to admit defeat. I said to her, well, I guess I'm not going to dance. I'm not going to dance because I can't think of anything to do and I'm not ready. And she said, that's very good, because she would have ruined the program and gotten on. And, you know, not because I was so bad, but because I was unprepared. And they had really prepared something. So what happened was that I found myself first on my hands and knees scrubbing the barn floor, try to remove the wax. It had been waxed for years and years, and it was so slippery, you couldn't stand on it. And then it was all the sand on the floor. So I did all that, and I helped them with all their physical preparations. We covered the windows with a dark paper so that the light wouldn't come in. And the back door, those of you who have been in the barn, there's a door at one end and a door at the other end. And each had a little porch. And at the back end, that was the stage door. In other words, it was the back of the stage. And Baba sat in the middle, underneath that wagon wheel chandelier, and all the people behind him and to the sides, and there was this half the barn empty as the stage. And I was, during the performance, on the back porch, opening the door for them to come on and go off. And I was the kind of stage manager, and I think I was the only person on the center who not only wasn't in it, but didn't even see it. But you see, by that time I had accepted that. But the hammer blow came, which probably sounds silly to you. At the end of the performance, with all the dancers out in the back there, someone came out and said, Baba wants you to come and be embraced for having danced, or whatever it was, for having done such a wonderful performance. So I held open the door, and they all started going in, and then they turned around and saw I was standing there, and they said, no, you have to come too. And that's when my ego really rose to the surface, and I said, no, there is no way I'm going out there. I didn't do anything, and I'm not going out to be embraced with Baba. And they said, you have to come. And I said, I said to myself, what kind of an avatar is he if he doesn't even know that I did that? You know what I'm saying? That he would have embraced me and said, you danced beautifully when I didn't dance, was to me, it was horrible. But they said, Baba says you have to go. So I said, okay. And we all went out, and of course we all had a lovely embrace from Baba, and he didn't say you danced beautifully, he just embraced me, which was very, very nice. And that was the story of my dancing for Baba, which was really, you know, that was another surrenderance. Not easy to do, believe me. Anyway, one of the wonderful things that happened to us in 1958 was the fact that we got to carry Baba in the chair. There were 5 dancers, and at first we carried him in a one of those carved Spanish chairs that are now in the barn, you know, a chair like this, that didn't really need more than 2 people to carry him. We got in 3 somehow or other, one at the back. And the first time we tried to carry him out of the barn, we went this way with him. And of course, going down the stairs, the chair tipped, and he almost fell out. So then we had to invent going out backwards so that we could tip him back in the chair and bring him out. And then another chair arrived, supposedly designed by Harry Kenmore. I never understood that exactly, but it was a chair with poles. And we could then pick up Baba, 4 people. So what we did then was have a rotational system. whereby the 4 boys that carried him rotated from the back to the front, and one of the ones on the front got off and somebody took, the 5th one took. It was very beautifully organized, because the front place was the good place to be. The front place was where you could get to be touched by Baba. As you were carrying him, he would put his hands on your shoulders. Sometimes he'd give you a big whack, or he'd chuck you under. You would get something that way from being in the front, which you didn't get in the back. And you certainly didn't get it when you weren't doing it. So we had this lovely system. Again, you see, I thought, gee, every time Peter's in the front or Tex is in the front, they get slapped and patted and all this, and I'm in the front and nothing ever happens. He doesn't really want me here. That's kind of what I was feeling. One day, we were taking Baba on a trip around the center in this chair. He had us go around the center past all the cabins, and in front of each cabin, he had us stop and set him down, and there was a moment, and then we went on to the next. Don't ask me what that was about, but that's what we did. Luckily, that was my day to be in the front, and I got on the front, and I was carrying him, and I was very happy, and it was not just the usual carrying, which was from the car to the barn and into where he sat, just a short distance. This was a long time. And we carried him, and I was in the front, and I was thinking, gee, this is terrific, I'm really liking this, and there's Tex on the side there, and he's not carrying, I really kind of felt a little bit guilty, but nope, I'm not going to give this up. And the minute I had thought about Tex, and the minute I thought about not giving it up, I started to not enjoy it anymore. I was feeling so guilty about it. I could only be conscious of Tex over there and the fact that I should give him a chance. I don't know why me, there were 3 other guys on the thing, but I felt that very strongly. And at the height of this, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and one of the Mandis said, Baba says you have to let Tex carry the chair for him. And so Tex carried the chair for a while. Then I got back. One day, one of the things also, Ms. Krasko said that you always had to be very careful if Baba gave you a job to do, that you should cherish it, because somebody might try to get it away from you. That happened a lot. And so, there was one young man there who was about our age group and had even taken some dancing lessons, but he wasn't really one of the dancers' group. He was in another group. And we knew for a fact, wanted to get his mitts on that chair. So we always had to be very careful that when Baba said he was going to be at the barn at 9:30, that we got there at 9 or whatever, to be ready with the chair. One day we were standing out by the lagoon cabin, and suddenly, without any warning, we had to be at the barn. There was a plan to go to the barn, and we had gotten the chair and set it outside, and then gone back down into the center proper to be wherever Baba was doing there, and we were going to have, at the right time, go there. But suddenly, without any warning, Baba announced, let's go to the barn. Now, all the dancers were clustered close to Baba, and everybody else was around, this big beehive of people, and on the very outer limits of the circle, naturally, was myself and this other young man. And at the minute Baba said, let's go to the barn, off he went. I mean, like an express train. And all I had time to do was to catch Tex's eyes, and they were trapped in the middle there. And I knew immediately what Tex, and I flew. And I don't know how I did it. I don't remember passing him on the road. I may have gone through the bushes, which you weren't supposed to do. Whatever I did, all I know is that the picture was this. I'm standing at the barn with this chair with my elbow on the barn, very nonchalantly. This young man is rounding the bend like the road runner, in a cloud of dust. And behind him are all these dancers trying to catch up to him. But I was there. So that was tough. Anyway, Baba, typically with Baba did have other people carry him in the chair. I don't think he ever really let anybody get too secure in their, job. He had the men carried Baba once, and then on another day when I was no longer there, I had left. He had women carrying him. So it wasn't, we were the only chair carriers in history type of thing. Then there came the day that I had to leave, and I was at the barn, and Bernice, Beryl's sister, right? She came around that bend in the road and saw me standing there, and she said, aren't you leaving today? I had to leave a day early. aren't you leaving today? And I said, yes. She said, well, you shouldn't be here. Baba is down at the lagoon cabin saying goodbye to the people that are leaving, and you're about to miss it. So I got into panic and raced. I knew I wouldn't make it if I went by feet, so I asked if I could borrow the dancer's car. And they said yes. And so I got in the car, tore off, started down the road, and another car was coming up the road. In those days, cars used that path there at the center, which they're not allowed to anymore. And so I swerved over on the side to let the car by and went in over a log and got stuck. It was one of those terrible things, and I had to jump out of the car and run. And I pulled up in front of Bamba. The Bamba's standing in front of the lagoon cabin with one or two of the Mandali. Very quiet, peaceful scene, and this thing arrives in a great cloud of smoke. And Baba went, what's this? And I said, oh, Baba, I'm leaving today, and you're saying goodbye to people, and I thought I missed it, and oh my God, and I thought, well, now he's going to really say, oh, I'm so unhappy you're leaving, this is, it's been so nice having you here, and do come again. And Baba looked at me, and he went, and then went back to talking to everybody like that. And I went, deflation. Which was nothing, Baba was always like that with people. He didn't say goodbye in that way very often. It was not the same thing. Anyway, that was some few of the things that happened in 1958. Now, I went back to my life, and I have to say that it was very difficult for me to relate my life to Baba all the time. It did happen at times, but this surrenderance didn't come in 1 minute or 5 minutes or 5 years or anything. In fact, I'm not so sure that I even at this point have really surrendered. I don't know if you really do surrender to Baba until you're totally able to give everything up, in which case you're not here anymore. I don't know. I don't understand that quite, but there's no question that I love Baba and I believe in Baba, but whether I've surrendered or not is another question. One day, see, the dancers never really spoke about Baba to people like I'm doing now or like people do. We spoke amongst ourselves. We were very quiet about it. We didn't go to meetings. We didn't really belong to a group. The dancers was a title in a way, but it wasn't a group. It wasn't a ballet company. It was just people who had studied with Miss Krask. I had gotten in my life, this sounds familiar, to a very low period, extremely low. And I decided that what I was going to do is put myself, you won't believe this, put myself into the hospital and have an operation. There was something I needed to have operated on that I could have done or couldn't have done, but I decided the best thing to go in the hospital and disappear from the world. I thought this is going to be great. So I did that, and I got in the hospital, and I had my operation, and I woke up and realized that it wasn't so great after all, because you're in a lot of pain after an operation. And because somehow when you're in a hospital and you see people around you being ill and suffering, something happened to me through that. It's something broke a little bit. And shortly after I got out of the hospital, Bruce Hoffman asked me if I would like to come down to Baba House and help out there. And I thought, well, I don't know. I never really had mingled with Baba community, and I didn't have any feeling about it, but I thought, well, okay, I will do it. I'm convalescing, I'm not working. And that was the first time that anybody said, oh, you met Baba, what was it like? Or what happened to you? I mean, I never had thought of even discussing it. Through that, through being at Baba House and meeting people and then starting to talk, something opened in me. And I started to now this was all after Baba had dropped his body. Things changed very much for me. I felt from that time on much closer to Baba, and I felt able to open out. I was a performer. I danced on stage in front of thousands of people at a time, and it didn't frighten me to be in front of a group of people, but about Baba, that was something else. Then I found out that we went to the Metropolitan Opera. I was at that time in the Metropolitan Opera Ballet Company. We went on a spring tour every year, and that tour took us to various cities, and one of the places was Boston, and one was Atlanta, Minneapolis, places where there were Baba groups. And then I got the idea to go and see Baba people in the Baba groups. So through all of this, I have to make this a little bit short. The point of it was that I decided to go down to Myrtle Beach when I was in Atlanta, to the center. Now, I had not been to the center in I don't know how many years, because I don't remember when this was, but a long time, because we all thought, what's the point of going to Myrtle Beach, the center? Baba isn't there. We went to see Baba. And I got quite excited. As a matter of fact, throughout this period, I was on some kind of a high about Baba, filled with Baba's love, and meeting all these Baba people, and I was going to the center. Well, the night we were to leave, I was going to be picked up at the theater by some Baba lovers, and we were going to drive down. We were doing an operetta called La Pericole, music by Offenbach, and in the first scene of the closing scene of the first act of that piece, we were clowns. And there were 8 boys, and there was a heroine and a hero in the opera. And in this scene, the 2 of them were seated in chairs with poles, little chairs, and we carried them out. And I was on one side with 3 other men, and the other 4 were on the other side, and I had the man, the hero, and I was in the front. And we picked him up. Now, you got to picture, it's very theatrical. They were singing the words of the song, "A Spaniard Knows the Ways of Love." And there were fireworks going off. I mean, you know, effects of fireworks. This big scene, and I picked this man up, and suddenly I went, this flash of being back with Baba. And we carried him out on the stage, and I stood there facing the audience, and I felt these great waves of love coming at me. And I was absolutely transported. And I went down to the dressing room, and I was just, you know, incredible. The next act, there was a real dance number, a ballet. And there was a point in that ballet where the boys were split on opposite sides of the stage and had to cross through each other like this. And the person that I had to cross through was someone I didn't like, and who didn't like me. And as I started to cross, I saw there wasn't enough room. He or the boy next to him had not spaced it properly, and they were too close together. And instead of trying to kind of, you know, slip through, I went bang, like this. I got so angry. I was so filled with this intense hatred of this boy and anger that it literally knocked him over in the middle of a performance. And then this was 20 minutes after this other scene. Okay? You get the picture. Then, what happened was, that was it. We did it. I got changed. I got dressed. I went outside to wait for my car. And then I thought, you know, you can't go to Myrtle Beach and leave this situation just like that. You just did this terrible thing. So I thought, okay, I'll go back in the theater and look for him and say I'm sorry. And I went back in and I couldn't find him. So I said, fine, I tried. Goodbye. Went outside. And I said, no, that's not good enough. You've got to go again. So I went back in the theater again, second time. No, couldn't find him. I felt exonerated. Outside, I felt guilty. I thought, all right, I went once more, and this time I looked in the dressing room, and see, I didn't find him in a dark corner where I could say, you know, something to him quietly. He was in the dressing room with all the rest of the boys in the company, and it was my last chance. And so I went up to him and I said, I'm really sorry, and can you forgive me for what I did? And I looked in his eyes, and I saw this look of a wounded creature, you know. And he said, I can forgive you, but I can't forget it. And I'm telling you that because life has been so full of things like that, where you see the opposites, where at one minute you're up and the next minute you're down, and gripped in this thing of love. Who did that? I didn't do that. I picked this man up and suddenly I was in paradise. The next minute, I bashed somebody up, knocked him. I didn't do that either because it just overcame me, this thing of hatred for this young fellow, who we didn't hate each other anyway, finally, years later. Right, years later. Now, the curious thing about all of this is the 2 incidents, the feelings about Baba, about not being loved by Baba and about being excluded and being an outsider. These were all I mean, I see it very clearly now. This is all in my mind. Baba loves everybody, but if there's a blockage, it's in you, not in him. One day, I was at some friend's house, and they said, "Do you want to see some films we took of Baba?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Well, you are on it." And I said, "Oh, that'll be nice." No. There was Baba being carried in the chair by 4 boys, and I was in the front, in the side nearest to the camera, center of the thing, and there Baba plainly patting me on the shoulder, taking me. As he gets out, he takes my arm. You see what I'm saying? He did all that. He did all that, and I didn't know it. I missed it. I didn't miss it. I didn't miss it at all. That was what had to be. The other thing was, 2 years ago when I was in India, I was sitting in the Manli Hall, and there were only about 2 other people there, and Erich and Mani were telling stories. And suddenly, I was overcome by this feeling of, I don't know what you can call it, if you want to call it love, whatever it was this very intense feeling that was near to being heartbreaking. And in a flash, I remembered that feeling. And that feeling was the feeling that I always felt when I was around Baba. So, what I'm trying to say is that I did feel it. So how that happens, how you can be unconscious of somebody touching you, but to be unconscious of a feeling that you remembered feeling is really something. So really, around Baba, I did love him. I did feel his love. Only it took me until 2 years ago, 1979, from 1956, all that time to go to India to realize that that was true. There were times when I felt perfectly perfect about Baba, and that was mainly 2 times doing things that Baba asked us to do. One was carrying Baba, was perfect, if something could be perfect, because there was no intervening thought. We did it, we carried him, we did what he asked, we did it well, we didn't drop him, It was wonderful. The other thing was a funny thing that I had to do. I've always been interested in rare and second-hand books, and I knew all the second-hand bookshops in New York, or not all, but the majority of them, okay? And I could find things. And as you know, Baba liked to read Nero Wolfe and P.G. Wodehouse. One day I got a letter from Miss Krask saying, "How would you like to do something for your master? Here is a list of books that Mani has sent that they want, and I'm up here in the mountains." She used to go away in the summer and teach at a dance camp. Could you find these books? Well, that was fantastic. Here was something that I liked doing, that I knew how to do, and I could do, and so I did it. And that started a whole series of correspondence between myself and Mani about these books. And all of the books that they asked for, which were out of print, you see, at that time, I found a lot of them. And I used to get these letters from Mani and these little postcards and cards and look at them and go, put them away in a drawer. Again, years later, I save everything. I have all of these papers and family letters. I looked at these things and I was so dumbfounded. Baba sends his love to his dear Donald. Baba says Donald did a wonderful job. Then the best of all was Baba sends his love to his dear Donald Duck. And tell him that he's a fast swimmer. What I'm saying is, I don't know if you understand, I'm trying to say that Baba loves us, and sometimes we don't know it. In fact, until you're ready to know it. Now, those cards and letters lay in a drawer, and I never looked at them. And there they were, years later, for me to see when I could appreciate it. And I did. All through the years, we had orders from Baba, orders of silence, orders of fast, orders to repeat certain sequence of words 500 times for a certain period of time, orders to say the Master's Prayer and the Parvat. You know, there were lots of times during all those years when we were asked to do things for Baba, and I always did them without any feeling whatsoever. I did them because Baba asked. Sometimes even it was a chore. Some of them were very difficult, and some of the orders that I was not able to obey, which caused me great pain. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I'll tell you about that now. In 1955, I walked into the ballet studio to see Miss Krask, who said, I saw her, I didn't go in to see her. She said, I've had a letter from India. See, all of the family letters and all the communications came through her. Either they went down through Elizabeth and then or through Fred Ella, but she gave them to us. I said, oh, wonderful, what's in it? She said, well, you're not going to like it. And I said, well, don't be silly. Somehow or other, the fact that you weren't being allowed to do it, made not it attractive to me, but made me attractive to others. If you can believe that. I don't want to put the blame on them. But what happened was that I broke that order, okay, and I was miserable. And I said, this is it, I will never, ever, ever, ever again break this order or any other order. I was so upset, you can imagine. Only to break it again. And then I was even more miserable. And again, the vows and the swearing, I will never, I'd go back and try again. Third time. And then I was like finished. It was in the middle of the night, I got up and I went downstairs. There was a little library. And it was part of a college. There was one room that had books. And, what am I going to do? I can't sleep. I'll read. So I went to the shelf and I pulled down a book. And it was a book of Bible stories. And I opened it up, and it was right at this page where they were telling the story of Peter denying Christ 3 times. And I thought, this is not an excuse, but if Peter could do it, I closed the book, and I said, that's it now, Then, in 1957, Baba gave us another one of these whammies, 6 months celibacy, which I did. I did not break that. But very relieved when the 6 months were over, only to discover that Baba socked it to us by asking us to do it for another 3 months, except for the married couple. She let off the hook. Anyway, I did that too. I almost succumbed, but I didn't. But I did it. But what I'm trying to say, now I have 5 minutes left, was this, that there were all these orders, some of which I could do, some of which I did grudgingly, some of which that I did as routine. I didn't feel any great love for Baba by saying, beloved God, thy will has come to pass, and all that, our beloved Baba will go 500 times a day. I did it. It was difficult to do. It was really hard to do, to find the time. Many funny things happened over that. But over the years, I felt that I had not done what I could have done and should have done for Baba and to follow Baba. No way. Many, many slip-ups, failures, many really, constant failures to think and speak and act according to His will. And one day I was talking to Miss Krask and I said, I don't understand all these years and all this, and I explained to her what I'm saying to you now. And I don't understand why how did it happen that way? How am I still with Baba? What is happening? And how did I get anywhere at all? And how did I come to meet Baba? She said, did you love Baba? You loved Baba, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, you loved him and he did the work. So, you have to be very careful when you say things like that, or when you think, because you mustn't think that you don't have to do anything. But I don't think that we know what we have to do. And that Baba leads us, each person, in a very individualistic way, through all of these experiences. And in my case, and I told you I was going to tell you the dark side, in my case, it was all the so-called bad experiences that brought me closer and closer. Without having seen the pain in that boy's face, I wouldn't have known really firsthand what it meant to cause others pain. The same with backbiting. Little by little by little, a lot of things have washed away and disappeared. Some other things still keep coming up. There was never a point when I could say, now I will no longer backbite, now I will no longer indulge in this or that or the other. But gradually over the years with Baba, things have worn away, the importance of them has lessened. Other things are more important. Understanding other people and getting along with them, for me, it's not for you or anybody else necessarily. That's the most important thing to me, and that's where my work is. I'm in charge of a group of 23 people, people meaning everything that means, and I'm responsible for them. I have to guide them and direct them. I have to deal with their problems. I have to not respond in a way which, in an easy way, just let myself be angry when they're angry. Anything like that. I have to control myself. Now, I'm not saying I do that terrifically well, but I do it. I'm there, I'm doing it. And if it wasn't for Baba, I couldn't do it. And people say to me, gee, you really handled that so well. And I think, if only they knew, what it was, doing it, and why and how. I don't like to, I've spoken often to people, but I don't like to say to anybody that what I'm saying is true. I may be 100% wrong, and I certainly might be 100% wrong for all of you, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying, go ahead and do your thing, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm only saying that you have to have some patience. Baba has infinite patience. You have to it takes time. It's taken us eons to get here. Baba accepted all of us who came to him and gave us so much and never bawled us out and never gave us sharp words. I'm sure he was quite capable of it. I'm sure that the Mandalik went through some very terrible things, but to us, poor things, he was very loving and sweet, and I think the least that I can try to do is be something like that in my life. So.